Hello everyone. So, it's time to take a look at the HTC One. Now, quite a few of you have mentioned the HTC One to me, saying that I should take a good look at it, because it's not as bad as previous HTC devices. Now, as many of you will know, I've had a long history with HTC, which pretty much ended with the Desire range. That was the last device that I feel that HTC made that was really worth buying. After that, they kind of went a bit too Apple for my liking. These unibody designs, it became more style over substance. So I was interested to take a look at the HTC One because a lot of people were saying that it's worth a second look, it's worth having a go at, and just seeing how it compares. Now, I picked this up cheap, I'll admit, so it does have a few little marks and so on there. Unfortunately, this appears to have one careless owner in just a few months, but the device is working fine, it's completely solid, otherwise I'd have taken it back. So other than a few blemishes on the actual exterior of the casing, which in some respects is an interesting discussion point anyway, I'm going to come on to later, the device is absolutely fully working. I've been soak testing it for a fair few days now. Now, let's first take a look at the actual external hardware, as it were, and we'll discuss a few things there which I think are quite interesting to note. So first of all, I'm just going to turn the display off. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see that, if I just angle this just right, hopefully, can you see these scratches on the screen? And again, scratches and marks and dents kind of all around the aluminium exterior, and again the back is slightly pitted and has some scratches. One of the things that I find quite interesting with the debate about the HTCs versus the Samsung for build quality and the aluminium versus polycarbonate, I have never seen polycarbonate scratch. Simple as that. Because it's a toughened plastics effectively, and polycarbonate, it's pretty scratch resistant. And what we can quite clearly see here is, this HTC has probably been dropped, let's be honest. Now, it survived a drop and it's working fine, but my exterior has taken a bit of a beating. It doesn't quite look as pristine. And actually, from videos I've seen, from articles people have written about the HTC One's durability, whilst it will survive a drop, it is going to get scuffed up pretty badly. And that probably includes keys in your pocket. Because at the end of the day, this coating of this aluminium is prone to scratching. So it's just something worth bearing in mind that, build quality goes in quite a few different ways, and it's not just about how physically solid something is, but how prone to picking up marks and scratches, and how resistant it's going to be to those as well. We can certainly look and see with the HTC One that it's a beautifully made device. I mean, good God, this thing makes Apple look like, I don't know, something a first-year art student would have created. The HTC One is a beautiful, beautifully striking creation. It has a 4.7-inch screen, front-facing speakers, which I'm going to come on to later, front-facing camera, rear-facing camera, which is a 4-megapixel ultra camera, which has a point there, that's obviously the LED flash. It has Beats audio built in, a couple of sensors and infrared ports, and a USB on the bottom. Now, it doesn't have a physical home button like a lot of Android devices do. Instead, it has a back button and what could be best described as a home button or a get me out of this app quick button. It's a little undefined in my opinion. You have volume on the side, which I'm afraid I wasn't overly fond of because they're completely flush to the body housing, making them quite awkward to hit actually. Apart from apparently when it's in my dock, where the dock immediately keeps hitting the buttons. Go figure. Don't have that problem with the dock on the S4. Very strange. The power button, likewise at the top, is flush, slightly raised actually, but pretty much you could describe that as flush. And I believe it also may be acting as the infrared port as well. It's either there or it's in there. Not too sure which. Now, as I say, this is one of the most striking devices I think I've ever used. The style of the actual aluminium body and the way it's been crafted is gorgeous, although it does seem to be prone, as I've noticed on a few reviews, that sometimes this front screen has not gone on quite as well as it possibly could have done. And so there is some gapping, as it were. If you can just about see that. There is occasionally some gapping along the top, and as you can imagine, where you've got a device which is effectively just being bowed slightly, getting a perfect millimetre by millimetre match is not always going to be possible. Ask Apple about that one, they have had similar issues. Now then, onto the actual device itself and its screen. So one of the things that I found slightly irritating is if you imagine using this on a flat surface, the actual viewing angle, so from left and right, top and bottom, to the angle that you will have your eyes to get the best picture quality is not particularly great. I believe these are using LCD screens, and so your viewing angle is always going to be slightly constrained compared to AMOLED, or Super AMOLED should I say. But one thing I noticed is this is a very bright screen. It certainly has the pop factor going on. And when looked at from a very good direct viewing angle, as the vast majority of people are going to use this device, it just has the slight edge over the Samsung Galaxy S4 and the Super AMOLED screens. Just by a slight fraction, and it's a little bit of a personal choice thing, I would say, but the screen is just a slightly bit sharper and has slightly better colour reproduction. Although that gap does seem to be closing with what we're seeing on the updates for the Galaxy S4. The text enhancement mode that's been added there has just brought the quality up a little bit better. But one of the things that has really disappointed me, I think, with the HTC One, and something that actually is a minor thing realistically because you can just patch it up yourself, the Sense UE is just awful. It's horrible. It's boring and bland and just makes me want to scream. HTC have created this gorgeous device and then use this horrible, dull, black looking launcher, and it's just like, why? Why? They've obviously decided that putting any time and effort into a launcher wasn't worth it. Well, HTC, here's my advice. Buy one of the launcher companies like Next or Go or Apex or any of them. Just buy them and use that, because what you've delivered here unfortunately just makes Android look about 2 or 3 years out of date. It's awful. Whilst the design language is pretty good and there's some nice cute little features, for instance inside your home drawer you can actually customize whether you want your stuff coming up alphabetically, the size of the grid, you can hide applications. Some great user features in here, some great usability choices in here. But the interface is dog ugly. I mean, ugh. But like I say, that's a thing that you can change yourself. You can install your own launcher and sense be gone, as it were. But even so, you would certainly expect on a high-end device like this a few more bells and whistles, a few more design touches, which really reflect the beauty of the device they've created. It's one of the things that just left me feeling like they put all of their money into the hardware and decided on the software front anything would do. I can almost appreciate that given the situation HTC has found themselves in over the last 6 months, but even so, it does make Android look positively out of date, this device, from a software perspective, even though the hardware itself is pretty cutting edge. One of the areas which has obviously seen the least as far as features are concerned are the settings area, which is decidedly bare. You've got all of your standard stuff, turn your airplane mode on or off, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, mobile data, your media output, which is a DLNA, I believe. In more, you've got your usage meters, the VPN, mobile network sharing, and near-field communication can be turned on or off. Then under personalization, it's pretty much your wallpapers, your lock screens, ringtones and so on. But you can see here, if you were to compare this to the Galaxy S4 or even the Galaxy S3 settings area, there's not an awful lot of settings here that can be tweaked and changed. In part because there's not an awful lot of pre-bundled software, which, I really appreciated. Until I realised that actually some of the stuff that Samsung have delivered on their S3 and S4s are actually quite useful, and they don't actually feel quite like bloatware when you're confronted with a device that has so little added software or features. Under accounts, this is where we can set up our googly stuff, or some of Sense's built-in things like the news ticker and the stocks and weather. Location, set your location sharing. Do you want satellites or not? Security, you've got a kid mode, which I did think was quite an interesting thing that they've added here. Essentially allows you to turn off a large number of the features of the HTC One to prevent the kids from obviously screwing with your settings. It allows you to lock particular applications as well. Notifications for your lock screen, those are available there. You can make your passwords visible, install from unknown sources, trusted credentials, or installed from the phone's storage. Accessibility provides those on-screen keyboard boosts and so on, speaking your passwords and showing a magnifier. Backup and reset, if you need to back up your stuff to Google or tweak how that backup is going to go. And also an automatic restore, and that's where you also reset your phone as well. Transfer content is HTC's own little clever way, I suppose, of smoothing the path between devices. So if you come into the HTC One and you've got a previous device, be it absolutely anything from a previous Android phone, previous HTC phone, iPhone, or another type of device like a Windows phone or a BlackBerry, you can simply go into these settings and it will allow you to import all of your stuff from the other device directly into this HTC One. I really like the idea of that. Having it built directly into the phone is a fantastic idea. Certainly beats having to have some external software you can only run on a PC or a Mac or what have you. You know, a lot of people today simply don't have a computer that they can plug these things into. So, you know, this is their computer. It's nice to see HTC recognizing that. Your display gestures and buttons. In here is where you can control really how your display is going to interact with you. So your font size, the brightness of the screen, how long it will wait for it times out, the notification flashing up at the top, double click speed, your HTC gestures, which I admittedly have not played with all of that much, but they seem to work pretty well. And your G-sensor calibration, which is a fairly standard thing these days. Beats Audio was one of the things I was kind of intrigued to try out. I've heard so many mixed reports about it. My own personal feeling is that Beats Audio is really just a great way to mangle really great audio. If you want to blow out the mids in your music, if you want to add loads of artificial bass that wasn't there originally, then turn Beats Audio on. This is on headphones, by the way. I'll come on to the speakers in a second. In my test with 3 or 4 different headphones, I found that I really preferred it with Beats Audio off. Essentially what Beats does is it just boosts the sound volume, and it boosts the mids, boosts the bass, makes things sound rather tinny in my opinion. And what you find is if you say have the volume on at, say let's call it 10, put the volume on at 10, Beats Audio boosts that volume up to say 12 or 13. So immediately you feel you have to turn the audio down. At which point you're actually pretty much negating a lot of the benefit you're getting anyway. What I found is put the audio on with Beats off, turn the volume up a little bit, use a decent pair of headphones, and actually the audio quality is just as good as it was originally intended by the artist. To a point anyway. I listen to a lot of FLAC, by the way, FLAC audio, so you know the quality is always there. It's a different matter, however, with the inbuilt speakers, these front-facing speakers, which are just mind-blowing. I mean, really, they make this tiddly little thing on the Samsung Galaxy S4 just look ridiculous. The sound quality when you have Beats turned on is just phenomenal, second to none, I would say. In fact, however, turn Beats Audio off, and these speakers are about as tinny as you can get. Obviously, having them front-facing improves the sound quality. You're not having to rely on bounce back. As you would with this, you know, bouncing it back off a table, off a wall or something to actually gain any decent level of volume. What you'll find though is, like I say, turn Beats Audio off and these front-facing speakers sound pretty dire actually. But with Beats Audio turn on, wow, you really get this kind of, I could just use this as you know, my stereo and not kind of worry about a separate device. Very, very impressive. Clearly there's something to be said for putting front-facing speakers on the device and then having a decent audio profile to go with them. I would say that HTC need to stick with this. It's a really good differentiator on their device and something I was really impressed with. Front-facing speakers make a big difference. The other manufacturers need to get their act together on this one. For too long now, we've been accepting rear-facing speakers like it's common and like it should be accepted, and actually it really shouldn't. It's illogical. It's not how audio works well. Bouncing it off other devices and so on, yeah, that's part of how audio does work. But when you effectively have something like this where, you know, put these two devices side by side and one is going to be muffled and the other one is going to be directing audio straight towards me. Which one is going to give the better audio quality with or without Beats? It's going to be the HTC One. There's nothing obscuring this audio. So, you know, from that perspective, I would say if you're really interested in your audio, the HTC One is definitely the one to lean towards. Overall, other areas of sound quality are things like your sound profile, so you can set up whether it vibrates or is silent. You've got your volume controls as well, so set your audio volume, and you can set those for can set those as you feel. You've got the ringtones are available there, pocket mode, etc. You can set your alarms, whether you want dial pad tones, touch sounds. I was really pleased to see that HTC turned that off by default, unlike Samsung, which leave those god-awful touch sounds on, and every time I ROM or flash, I'm having to turn the damn things off again. Screen lock sounds, pull to refresh and vibrate on touch is also there. Your call area, again, I don't actually have a 3G SIM in this at the moment, but all of your options are in there for that. We'll whiz through the rest of these. Changing your apps, your storage and your power is all in there. Language and keyboard date and your developer options. Excellent. All nice and available. Now, one of the things that I found really frustrating with the HTC is it's a beautiful design, but this curved back they placed on it is actually not very user-friendly. Let me show you why. For starters, anytime you tap the screen, can you see this insane amount of rocking that goes on? Now, it's fine if you're tapping directly in the dead center, but ask yourself how many times that happens in a game. No, you tend to be up toward more of the corners, and especially if we're down like this, and we've got this going on all the time. You place that against any other smartphone device. Let's use the Samsungs again as an example. There is some rocking in the Samsung devices at the corners, but it's nowhere near as much as this. If you were to consider it in a period of degrees, you'd be almost like, well, this is rocking by 15 to 20 degrees. Samsung device rocks by maybe 3 to 4 degrees. That is a big thing, in my opinion. So this device doesn't work particularly well if you're going to be working with it on a flat surface. It also has another slight problem, which I'm just going to show you now. I'm now going to show you the major problem I have with the HTC One, which is its in-the-hand feel. Now, it's not so much the in-the-hand feel as the staying in the hand feel. So, the HTC One has a curved back, which is nice, apart from the fact that it rocks on the table, as I've just said. But does give a nice feel in the hand. There's a certain element of curving to it, which is nice, although these edges aren't quite as tapered as I would have liked. For instance, on other devices, that tapering kind of snugly curves into the edges and grooves of your finger. On the HTC One, it feels almost like it's pushing back against you a little bit. But the major problem I have with the HTC One is this. You see how easily that just slid straight through my hand. Now, the amount of, I'm holding it flat now, and I'm just going to turn my hand up. And we're going to see at what point this just slides off. There. Now, I'm going to show you exactly the same thing again, and I'm going to do it with the HTC One, with a Galaxy S4. Still going, still going, still going, still going, still going. It's almost at 90 degrees now, and it's just slid through. And that is the major difference between the HTC One and the S4 from a point of view of the in-the-hand feel. You are going to need a case with the HTC One if you're concerned about it sliding through your hands, which I certainly am. Let's just show you that again. Effectively, it's gone by about 30 degrees, where Galaxy S4, Galaxy S3's Note 2, the polycarbonate has a certain amount of friction within its kind of genetic makeup, its molecular makeup. It doesn't slide through the hand as easily. And I should also say my hands are actually slightly clammy as well, which doesn't seem to aid the the HTC One at all. You would at least hope a little bit of moisture on the hand, some stickiness would, slow it down a little bit, but there you can see it just goes. It's a very slippy phone, and there's been a few times now when I've taken it out of my pocket and I've nearly lost the grip on it. If you're buying the HTC One, you are going to need a case for this device. That is without a shadow of a doubt. So it's like everything. There's always a trade-off with these things. Yes, we're getting the aluminium. Yes, we're getting the nice shiny curved back, but we're getting a shiny curved back. It means that there's not enough friction and grip there. What you would expect is that this band here would be maybe made of some material, something that would just give a little bit more grip, but it's not. It's purely a shiny surface really across the whole thing. And I'm afraid that does make the Galaxy S4 more prone to dropping. If you don't have a case on it, the chances are you're going to drop this phone more often than you're going to drop a Samsung phone. That's a choice you will have to decide if you're willing to make. But again, if you're talking about a case to go onto the HTC One, maybe £10, £15, £30 if you really want to push the boat out, and you can alleviate that problem. But it is still something that, honestly, they could have designed around, and it wouldn't have been too much of a problem. Just adding some area of here which had a slight texture or grip would just give your hand something to grip onto, or the device something on your hand to grip onto, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, let's come on to the kind of software package that HTC have put in here. Why you can't draw that all the way up to the top and release, you have to flick it, I don't know. One of the major things that HTC have gone for here is this BlinkFeed, and it was kind of like their big headline feature next to what they've done with the camera. And again, I kind of just feel it's very underwhelming. Well done, you've recreated a feed on a home screen, because that hasn't already been done loads of times before and done better by everybody else. It's such a lackluster implementation as well. It looks cute, sure, it's got that kind of thing going on, but it's no Flipboard, it's no Appy Geek, it's no Twitter, it's no Facebook, it's no Google+. It doesn't support Google+, for starters, which is just bizarre on an Android device. But obviously that's more of a Google thing because there simply are no APIs yet that will allow that level of access. But you would still think that Google would want one of its tier 1 partners to have some slightly higher quality integration on the kind of central part of the software experience of the HTC One is supposed to be around this BlinkFeed. And it's just very lackluster, like I say. It will pull in from LinkedIn, it will pull in from Facebook, it will pull in news that you can select yourself, but a lot of it, like I say, has been done much, much better in other applications previously. Now, the BlinkFeed will just keep scrolling down. One of the things that I found really interesting, and I actually applaud HTC for, is when I first loaded up the device, the BlinkFeed started telling me about things I could do with my HTC One, including how to set it up, tutorial videos, guides, and everything like that. And actually, that makes a lot of sense. Why on earth are mobile phone manufacturers throwing a tiny little manual in the box and then expecting people, I don't know, to just figure it out on their own? Having that kind of startup experience that allows a new user or someone not familiar with your particular brand of Android handset an easy way to orientate by downloading a few short videos. It's a great idea. All of the manufacturers should be doing that. It just makes sense. Now, to get rid of BlinkFeed, or to move it out the way as it were, just swipe. And then you're into your normal Android desktop as it were. And in there you've got the usual affair. Add your icons, add your widgets, etc. But it is just a little bit jarring having the BlinkFeed hiding effectively one of your screens all the time. Everything else is pretty much the muchness. As I've said, it's standard Android running under here. If anything, this feels very standard Android. It would have been nice for HTC to have made a bit more of an effort. This blacky blackness that they've got going on with the interface, it kind of lacks the shades of grey and colour that just will help the interface kind of come to life. I do like the way they've done the clocks and the widget, etc. It's not a widget, it's a clock. It's integrated as part of this drawer, effectively, the app drawer. But it's nicely done. But everything's just very black. And it just feels so boring, basically. Which is a real shame. Now, one of the reasons I think they went this way is because they aren't using an edge-to-edge display. So we do have this black border running around the edge of the 4.7-inch screen. So by having this overall black interface, it kind of feels like a better blend going on overall. But, as I say, it just feels so boring and just so lackluster. A real pity. Now let's move on to one of the most discussed areas of the HTC One, and an area I found myself remarkably impressed with, and that's the HTC One's camera. It's an UltraPixel camera, which means that effectively HTC are kind of eschewing what we've all kind of been told for years and years and years that was rubbish, that the more megapixels you have, the better image quality you're going to get. That's a very subjective thing, and it has more to do with the amount of light the sensor is getting in, as much as how much sensitivity the sensor has. What HTC have done is to, instead of going for big megapixel counts, they've crammed more pixels into a smaller sensor. So this is a 4 megapixel sensor, but combining with the pixel density of the sensor and the optics they've used, they've managed to create a camera which has an f of 1.8, I believe it is, which is incredibly low. That's basically how much light this lens is able to take in and the sensor is going to be able to record. And by doing that, they've got a camera that works in low light, a smartphone camera that works in low light. Now, as you may or may not know, I have a couple of cats, and they're both jet black. Now, even my DSLR camera, with one of the best lenses Canon make for it, cannot take a decent picture of my cats. Why? Because the software sees black and it thinks it needs to boost the light. It doesn't seem to realise that it's actually an animal that's there. So all that happens is you get lots of dirt and kind of a muddy picture, unfortunately. And obviously it opens up the aperture too high, so if the cat moves it gets blurry. What I found that just blew my mind, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it now, is the HTC One camera takes brilliant pictures of my cats. Here, take a look at this. So that was taken last night. There was some reasonably good artificial lighting. I mean, they're not particularly the brightest lights you can see in this white area here, but they're more of a yellow light than a white light. And the cat was actually pretty much in darkness. The only extra light source was just coming from the television set. And this was taken at about 9 o'clock at night, I think. And as you can see, the camera has done a remarkable job. It's managed to well expose a cat which is completely jet black other than some green eyes. It's managed to pick out the background area as well, and it's managed to not completely blow out the highlights in order to do it. I have never seen a camera on a mobile phone achieve a result like this. It is absolutely phenomenal, and there's plenty more examples these were burst shots, by the way, so you see, that one was taken with perfect good sunlight hitting the cat. Just mucking around. These ones were interesting. There was actually no light turned on. The only light was coming from the bathroom, which is this bright white area you can see here. The rest of this was actually what I would consider to be too dark to take a photograph in without a flash. And it did it. And it did it beautifully. One of the things I find really interesting with this camera is the burst mode as well. It being able to fire 20 shots simultaneously, one after another, rapid fire, or you can turn that mode off and have it just keep firing. It creates some great photographic opportunities, especially when you kind of look at some of the stuff like Auto Awesome from Google+, which allows you to string these shots together and it will automatically animate them for you. The camera is so versatile. Again, this is another one where the light source was sort of above here coming from a window, but the cat herself was pretty much obscured. Normally, Galaxy S4 would not take a picture of that scene. It just simply wouldn't. It would come out blurry. It would most likely give me a little red square saying it couldn't lock on. It would try firing the flash maybe, but probably it wouldn't because it sees a bit of light coming from there. Or it will decide that that's actually where it wants to focus and it will completely ignore the thing that's in the centre of the screen. The HTC One is hands down the finest low light shooter I have ever seen on a camera phone. Potentially the finest I've ever seen on a point and shoot camera. Not as good, obviously, as some of the high priced DSLRs that cost many thousands of pounds, but what the hell do you expect? It's a phone. But I mean, HTC really do need to be given a very, very big award for kind of pushing things forward on this front. And I really want to see this technology stay with HTC and potentially get adopted by other manufacturers as well. It's brilliant and it just works so, so well. However, that's the low light performance of the HTC One. Where the camera starts to let itself down a little bit is in those well-lit shots. The Galaxy S4, I'm afraid, pulls ahead here. It has it has substantially higher, nearly 3 times higher pixel resolution on the Galaxy S4 camera. And what that means is that you've got more cropping area, for starters. So if you want to take a big picture on the S4, you can crop into it. You don't have the luxury of that here. You'll generally find that the thing you've taken the photograph of is probably the maximum amount of crop you're going to get in most cases. You're not going to be able to crop in too much. You're not going to be able to pull out any smaller detail points, for instance. But colour reproduction wise, when they both have good incoming light, they are both excellent at their colour reproduction. Neither one overly saturating the images, although in my opinion the HTC is not quite as sharp. And a lot of that is going to come down to the fact that it doesn't have the same number of megapixels overall. So when you take an image that's say 13 megapixels and you look at it on a 1080p screen, you're actually reducing the size of that image to show it on your 1080p screen by about 3 times. So you're increasing the density effectively of those pixels that you're seeing. The HTC One doesn't have as much of that value. It's not going to be reduced as by much, so you're not going to quite get the same level of clarity. But also, because of the 4 megapixel sensor they've got here, it just isn't quite as sharp as the Galaxy S4. I think it's debatable which is the better full light shooter. However, the HTC One just pulls ahead in its ability to work across the widest spectrum possible. I would personally be willing to say I would sacrifice some clarity and some resolution in perfect lighting conditions, which the Galaxy S4 does excel at, in order to have a better all-round shooter. And I think that is really the piece de resistance with what HTC have done here. The beauty in all of this is that they've not created a camera which is brilliant at low light. They've created a camera that's brilliant in all light. And unlike Samsung and some of the other manufacturers, where what they've actually done is just created a good shooter that works when it has reasonably good light or brilliant light, the moment that light starts to fall off, the moment you step inside, frankly, no other smartphone on the market compares to what the HTC have delivered here. The Nokia PureView certainly has the resolution, it has, I think, the Xeon Flash and so on, but its low light performance is still not quite what the HTC One is giving, in my opinion. If you were looking at purely based on which is the best overall shooter in the world, the PureView probably is going to win just because it's mental. 41 megapixels, for instance, and you know the optics they're running there. But then you're getting a really poor phone. So you know, there's your trade-off. Do you want? Would you like a phone with your camera or a camera with your phone? If you're interested in photography, if you do a lot of photography in lots of different lighting conditions, the HTC One's the one to get. Simple as that, hands down, without a shadow of a doubt. This is the best shooter on the market. Overall, having considered the speed and performance of 2 gig of memory, the 1.7 gigahertz processor, I believe, is in here, the GPU and the quality of the screen, its ability to play games is not compromised by the fact that it's running a slightly slower clock speed. I would say the frame rate is maybe dropping 2 or 3 frames a second over the Galaxy S4, but it is considerably faster than the Galaxy S3 and the Galaxy Note 2. If you're someone who's interested in gaming, you're not going to find the HTC One a disappointment. In fact, I found it to be a very competent gaming device. Where it does suffer slightly is in its heat build-up, in part because of this aluminium body. What we do find is that basically the heat transfer is exceptionally good, and it's in the sense that effectively the aluminium heats up just as you would expect aluminium to heat up, and it transfers it straight to your hand. I grumbled a lot about the Galaxy S4, and people said to me, oh, check out the HTC, it doesn't get as hot. Yeah, maybe you should check out a Galaxy S4 because the HTC gets just as hot. But I grumbled a lot about the uncomfortable heat coming from the Galaxy S4 after 20 minutes. And the same problems here on the HTC One, guys, I'm sorry. Because of the aluminium, though, it actually heats up quicker and it becomes hotter and more uncomfortable a bit faster, in my opinion, because there's nothing insulating effectively like the polycarbonate does on the Samsung. Also, bearing in mind that on the Samsung, you've actually got a removable backplane, which in itself has a small amount of air gap in some areas. So that, again, is going to just tweak slightly the thermal properties of the casing. If you get a separate case for the HTC One, you're not really going to suffer that problem. It's going to produce pretty similar results, I would have thought, to the polycarbonate. But for those people that say the HTC One is better for heat, sorry, you're wrong. They're both just as bad as one another, in my opinion. And again, we cannot keep going on like this with smartphones. These are not laptops, they are not tablets, and they are not desktop computers. We can't keep clocking processors this high without dealing with the thermal problems that these devices are generating. A lot of this comes down to Qualcomm. They have gone for clock speeds over heat efficiency and power. That can't continue. All the manufacturers know that. If you look at what's happened with the Tegra 4, that's suffering similar battery drain problems and excessive heat as well, from what people have been saying. It does seem that we've reached a little point right now within the marketplace where something's got to give. And actually, in my opinion, I think Intel may have the answer here. The next mobile chips they've got coming through are absolutely wiping the floor with everybody else, especially with anything ARM-based. Intel seem to have really picked up their game. Power consumption is lower, heat is lower, clock speeds are still good. So, you know, it is possible to do it if you spend your time working on an architecture built for mobile. ARM is not really quite doing it for me at the moment when it comes to the whole heat problem. I think we do need to have an industry-wide powwow, I think, and they have to reduce the heat. If they can't, then they have to reduce the clock, because we can't have a situation. Well, what happens when we hit 2.3 gigahertz, which is apparently going to be the Qualcomm 800 chips? I mean, are we expected to wear oven gloves at that point? Because that's pretty much where we're heading. Do you know what I mean? These devices are getting too hot under heavy load. Overall, though, if we look at the HTC One, if I had been offered this device by a network, if I was dropping 500 quid on one. Would I be disappointed? God no. The HTC One is a phenomenal device. And it almost pains me to say that, given how much of a dislike I've built up over the years for what HTC have done with their devices. They've at times gone for style over substance. They've often been very anti-consumer in the way that they've run their anti-romming and routing operations. And they've generally produced devices which are not as good as their competitors in quite a few different ways. Now, some of that trend still continues with the HTC. We still don't have what I would consider a modern interface. Some people would say it is modern, other people would say it lacks a certain level of polish and professionalism. Overall, there's just enough here for me to say that this device competes perfectly with the Samsung Galaxy S4. It wipes the floor with the Galaxy S3. The Note 2, hey, that's a personal choice thing. You're going to be in for those bigger displays, but if you're interested in the Note 2. But, putting like a Galaxy S4 and a Note 2 side by side, kind of using both devices simultaneously and throughout the day and flipping between them, at no point did I feel I was missing out with the HTC One. In fact, I felt in some areas I was gaining in some versatility. Like I say, front-facing speakers, brilliant, brilliant. The camera, brilliant. The aluminium style and look of it, it's alright, The fact it slides through your hands a bit too easily, boo, not good, don't like that. But it's a great package. I just wish they'd improved the software. I really do wish they'd improved the software because I think it lets the device down horribly. But like I say, you can fix that with a launcher. If I was to give a rating, if I was to say which device is kind of the best on the market, I would say right now it's level pegging, guys, and it comes down to what you want from your device. If you want the 5-inch screen, then it's going to be an S4, isn't it? If you want a brilliant camera that works across every single kind of shooting environment you could possibly imagine, but maybe just isn't quite the best on the market, then it's going to be the HTC One. If you care about music and audio and everything that goes around with that, watching movies, then it's going to be the HTC One. If you're interested in viewing angles and sharing content and watching content with your friends, then it's probably going to be the Galaxy S4. It has the better viewing angles. But overall, there is no reason to say don't buy a HTC One. There's no reason to say don't buy a Galaxy S4 right now that it's been patched up. They're both excellent devices, and the HTC One has impressed me absolutely immeasurably, to the point where I'm like, I'm going to have to take a look at more of HTC's range that comes out this year. If it's true they're going to a phablet, I want to see that. I want to have a look at the HTC Mini as well, because that may very well be a very sweet spot product, operating in the mid-range, but with all of the design aesthetics and some of the power of the HTC One. Again, if it includes the camera from the HTC One, it's going to be an absolute star, I think. All in all, I came away impressed with the HTC One. Almost to the point where it might just become my daily driver. Don't fall off your chairs all at once. I just said I actually liked the HTC One. Do you know what I mean?